The Austronesian language family is a huge family of languages spoken throughout Southeast Asia and throughout to Polynesia. Today, however, we're going to focus on the Eastern Polynesian branch. Specifically, we're going to look at two main branches of the Eastern Polynesian. The Tahitic branch, which includes Tahitian and Maori, and the Marquesic branch, which includes Marquesan and Hawaiian. The third branch of East Polynesian is Rapa Nui, spoken on the Eastern Island. Today, we're going to look at how similar Maori and Hawaiian are. First, let's look at the vocabulary. The word for nose.
Ihu.
Ihu.
The word for people.
Kanaka.
Tangata.
Notice that in Hawaiian, K sounds change from T sounds like in Maori. Another example is the pronoun for they in the plural.
Lako.
Rātou.
However, I should note that some dialects of Hawaiian keep the sound T for written K. The word for five.
Erima.
Irima.
The word for love.
Aloha.
Aroha.
The word for eat.
Ai.
Kai.
Notice that a glottal stop in Hawaiian corresponds with a K sound in Maori. Another example is the personal pronoun for you in the singular.
Oe.
Koe.
These cognates are quite similar to each other and can easily be recognized via the sound changes I mentioned. But there are also many false friends, words that look and sound similar to each other but actually have different meanings, or are related at some point.
Kino.
Kino.
In Hawaiian, this is the word for body, but in Maori, it means bad.
Hiamoe.
Hiamoi.
We can see a related meaning with Hawaiian sleep and Maori tired.
Kai.
Kai.
In Hawaiian, this word means sea, but in Maori, it means food. Orthography and pronunciation. Both languages have pairs of short and long vowels. Long vowels are written with a macron on top of the letter. Their consonant inventories are also quite similar to each other. Hawaiian, h, k, t, l, m, n, b, w, v, and okina, which represents a glottal stop. In Maori, it's h, k, l, m, n, p, r, t, f, f, ng. Notice that in both languages, and in Polynesian languages in general, they generally have small consonant inventories. Diphthongs are basically vowel sequences, which are made up of two basic vowels together. Also, the stress of most words is on the penultimate syllable, or second to last syllable. These phonologic rules make pronouncing words relatively easy for English speakers. Grammar. The word order of both languages is VSO. For example, the sentence meaning, I love you, in Hawaiian,
Aloha wau ya oe.
and in Maori.
Aroha huki a koe.
Word for word, it's love, I, you. However, I should note that in Maori,
Ahau.
is interchangeable with the pronoun.
Au.
Similarly, in Hawaiian,
Wau.
is interchangeable with.
Au.
You also see object particles that come before the personal pronoun for you, ia in Hawaiian, but kia in Maori. Verbs do not conjugate according to person and number. Instead, verbal particles are placed near the verb to indicate time, aspect, and mood. For example, this sentence meaning, she's eating a watermelon, in Hawaiian.
Ke ai ne o ia I ka meloni.
Word for word, it's present continuous, eat, she, object marker, the watermelon. In Maori,
Kei te kai ia I te miringi.
word for word, it's present continuous, eat, she, object marker, the watermelon. In both languages, the present continuous marker is kene in Hawaiian, but keite in Maori. I should also note the imperfective can be used here, e ana, but this doesn't imply that action is immediate. We also see the object marker e in both languages. This can be used for direct and indirect objects. In other words, accusative and dative objects. We also have definite articles in both languages, in Maori
Te.
and in Hawaiian,
Ka.
or before the letters A, E, O, or K,
Ke.
like in the watermelon.
Ka meloni.
Te miringi.
There are also plural definite articles,
Na.
Ngā.
like to say the watermelons. It's.
Na meloni.
Ngā miringi.
Both languages have the indefinite article,
He.
He.
like in a watermelon.
He meloni.
He miringi.
But I should note that these are non-specific indefinites. For specific indefinites, they're.
Ke kahi.
Tētahi.
So to say a certain watermelon, that's.
Ke kahi meloni.
Tētahi miringi.
If we remove the first consonant in both languages, we get the plural indefinite.
E kahi.
Ētahi.
So to say certain watermelons, it's.
E kahi meloni.
Ētahi miringi.
Before we saw the third person singular subject pronoun.
O ia.
Ia.
Most other subject pronouns are equivalent or cognate, but I should note that there are two forms of the dual pronoun in both languages. There's the exclusive pronoun,
Maua.
Māua.
meaning it doesn't include the listener. But to say we, including the listener, that's
Kaua.
Tāua.
possession also works quite similarly in both languages. For example, the sentence meaning this is my friend. In Hawaiian,
O ko'u hoa aloha ke ia.
word for word it's equative sentence marker, my friend this. In Māori,
Ko tōku hoa tēnei.
word for word it's specifying marker, my friend this. First, we see different words in both languages. In Hawaiian, o is the equative marker, which indicates something specific in an equative sentence. But in Māori, ko is the general specifying marker when it's the predicate of the sentence. The predicate is the part of the sentence that tells us something about the subject, which is primarily a verb or an adjective. Both languages don't also have the verb be, just the predicate and the subject. The most common word orders in Austronesian languages are PS, or predicate subject, or VSO, verb subject object. Notice also the demonstrative comes last in both sentences. But in Māori, there are two other ways of specifying the sentence.
Ko taku hoa tēnei. Koi nei taku hoa.
Next, look at the possessive for mai.
Ko'u.
Tōku.
Possessives in Hawaiian and Māori work similarly for each other. These forms here are O-class forms, or recessive possessive forms. These are used for things you can't decide to own, or you own them automatically, like friends in this case. The other form is A-class, or dominant possession. These are used for things you can choose to own or you're dominant over it, like a book for example. So to say, my book is
Ka'upuke.
Tāku puka puka.
in Hawaiian, notice that there are two different forms of the singular pronoun, A-class and O-class, but in the dual and plural forms, ka or ko are placed before the personal pronoun. However, in Māori, it's a little more complicated. There are separate lists for both plural and singular items. Let's look at one final sentence in Hawaiian and Māori. This sentence means, that cat saw my mother. In Hawaiian,
Ua ike ke la popoki I ko'u makuahine.
word for word it's perfective marker, see, that cat, object marker, my mother. In Māori,
I kite tērā ngeru I tōku māmā.
word for word it's past tense marker, see, that cat, object marker, my mother. But I should note that in this case, the word mama is used instead of matua, which means parent. First, we see different past tense markers. In Hawaiian, it's the perfected marker, which shows that this action was completed, while in Māori, e represents the past tense marker. We see different cognate words for the verb see,
Ike.
Kite. Kitea.
and we also see those cognates again in the word for that.
Ke la.
Tērā.
But I should note that there are two different forms of the demonstrative for that. To say that near the listener, it's
Ke na.
Tēnā.
the demonstratives in the sentences above mean that away from both the speaker and listener. Also note that ka and ta switching and la and ra also switching between both languages. Then we have the object marker e in both languages, and again the O-class possessive form of mai. The O-class form is used here because parents are treated as O-class. You don't own them. As you've seen throughout this video, Māori and Hawaiian are quite similar to each other. Though I'm sure most of you can see that they're not exactly the same language, and they're not dialects of a single language, it's very clear that they're very related to each other. I'm curious about something though. For Māori and Hawaiian speakers, how well do you understand each other's language? And for people who don't speak either, how similar do you think both languages are after seeing this video? And which language do you think is harder? Anyways, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.